Hi everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MT Predictor software program. In today's MT Predictor video, as usual, I'd like to start with our risk disclaimer and just remind you all that all examples in these videos should be considered as hypothetical. They were not actually traded, and also, which is very important, there's risk of loss in trading and investing. All trade decisions are your own sole responsibility. If you remember in my last video, I talked about some losing trades, and in particular I've been talking about the cyclical nature of trading. And now I want to go and have a look at some charts and show you how that cycle has gone round, just as I was anticipating in my last video. In the last video I was saying that we'd had a hard time, the markets have been quite difficult, and I was saying that because the markets go through cycles where there's good periods, bad periods, unsure periods, that after a time of a bad period, which I was covering in the last video, that we're then ready to come through to some good trades, and that's exactly what's happened. This is what unfolded yesterday, which was the 18th of October, and I want to have a look at this beautiful Holy Grail sell here on the NQ a bit later in the video. But I want to start first with some of the other E-minis, particularly as we were looking at these in our MT Predictor training webinar for customers yesterday. I want to start with the ES and this TS3 buy setup. This was a standard MT Predictor buy setup in the direction of the MTP trend color. You can see it's blue, and as you can see, if I place the analysis on, the market didn't reach its first target but did rally quite nicely. And what I was suggesting in our training yesterday was, once the market got to the the DP from the previous wave B high, to put your stop at the very least for break even. But also seeing how the market moves sideways throughout the major part of this day here, I'd probably have suggested perhaps moving things a little bit closer as well, perhaps using the ATR stop a bit later on, particularly as the NQ reached its higher time frame resistance, as we'll see in a minute. Let's have a look at the higher time frame resistance on the ES, and this is what we're looking at in yesterday's webinar. I went back to the higher time frame chart, which is the 15-minute chart. I placed the DP off that last pivot high there. You can see there's the high, and we're looking at this as a resistance area here. And my comments in the webinar yesterday were some discretion should be used. In other words, even though our MTP trend indicator was still blue, can you see here we're only about a tick or so shy of this resistance zone. If the market had been a tick or so higher here, this MTP trend color indicator would have been red and therefore indicated a downtrend. So of course, technically it hadn't quite reached it, but it was pretty close. So I suggested for more conservative traders that they probably want to be a bit more aggressive with their stop loss management, hence bringing it to break even. So this was a clear picture to start with, and you really had to just deal with how to manage your profits, which is a very nice position to be in as well. But the clearer picture was a bit later in the day on the NQ. So let's go over to the NQ and have a look at this. This particular case here, this TS3 buy setup, was against a red MTP trend, so as we discussed in the webinar, this was not one to take. In particular, if we go out to the 15-minute chart, this was really clear indeed, because here was the last major pivot high. You can see that quite clearly. Looking at all these highs here, this was the last major high. So we right mouse click, place the DP on. Remember, these are on the chart in advance, so we were actually just talking about these yesterday before the market even made its new highs for the day. But if we go back to the 3-minute chart, this is what I was suggesting. That there had reached the 15-minute resistance zone, therefore this was against the large degree trend, so you'd want to avoid it. You may want to take this VS sell here, so let's take a worst case scenario. Place the analysis on. Again, it's always important to look at losing trades. There are far too many software vendors who just skip over losing trades and seem to forget them. Losses can, will, and do happen. I'll say it again. Losses can, will, and do happen. But what we do with the use of correct position sizing, in this case risking less than 2% of a sample $20,000 account, we vary the number of lots, contracts, or shares to keep your initial risk small and under control. Depending on how you manage this, this would have either been a break-even trade if you'd gone to break-even once you'd reached the 100% initial risk level, or it would have been a -1 hour loss if you'd kept it at the original level. Let's take a worst case scenario. Again, it's always better to be probably worst case than too optimistic when we're looking at the market. So that would have been a 1 hour loss. Market went up into the resistance area again. You can see there's the resistance area on the chart. And in fact, actually, if I right mouse click over the high of the day and do Elliott wave intermediate, you can see we had a 5-wave sequence coming up here. And also, if I just take this zone back and take the resistance zone off the high of the day there, or the high earlier in the day, can you see here, this is about where we were. But we were right in this larger degree resistance anyway. So because we're in larger degree resistance, do you really want to be taking a VS buy setup? In other words, you're at resistance, do you want to be taking a buy setup? Well, technically the MTP trend color indicator is black, so you can take it, but my advice is when you're taking trades like that and it looks like you could be potentially in the wrong direction, is being more aggressive with your stop loss management. In other words, this is one where once you'd hit the 100% initial risk level, you should really be bringing your stop to break even. So this would have been at probably best case a break even trade, but even if you kept it long, once you got up to this holy grail sell here, you want to be stopping and reversing. So best case scenario here will be taking a small profit. So why would this be a good trade to take? Well, first of all, it's on our black MTP trend, so you can take both sides of the coin. But as we've seen, just clear everything off here. As we've already seen, this was major resistance. Major resistance came in at the high of the day here earlier, just after 12:30. This was the initial decline off the major resistance. This was the initial correction to the initial decline off the major resistance that unfolded in an ABC. If I put on Elliott wave intermediate, you can see it unfolded in ABC. In Elliott wave terms, this is a wave 2. After a wave 2, we're then anticipating a strong wave 3 kind of decline, which in Elliott wave terms is the strongest and longest move in a completed 5-wave sequence. That's why I've nicked the Holy Grail trade setup, because when we place the analysis on here, we're looking to go to the typical wave 3 WPT. In other words, we're looking to treat this as if it's a wave 3, and you can see even at the first target, the profit was approximately 4.5R, or 4.5 times greater than the initial risk. Standard trade management guidelines suggest that when you reach the first target, you then look at the strength of our MTP trend. What does that mean? It's whether the market, the oscillator has gone beyond or is less than our strength band, which are grey bands here. You can just about see that when it reached the level here, the MTP trend was beyond our strength band, therefore the market was defined as what we call as being strong. Therefore, we're thinking the market's going to run a bit further. Therefore, we use our ATR stop, which is our red dots here, to manage the trade. In other words, do our stop loss for you. This means that you wouldn't have been stopped out at the target here. You could have held it short into basically the close of the day, which was down here, for an absolutely massive 9R profit. If you've been using our trade module in our NinjaTrader 7 add-ons, as you can see here, there are tools that allow you to manage this automatically. Either before you enter the trade, you can set it up to swap to the ATR once you reach the target if the market's strong, or you can swap to the ATR manually and do it that way. The MTP trade module is available in our Pro edition, or is available for a $499 upgrade to our NinjaTrader 7 and NinjaTrader 8 add-ons. Let's just take that off. So as you can see, this was an absolutely brilliant trade. A brilliant trade that had come after a period of losing or slightly more uncertain times. So this is a great example of the cyclical nature of trading, and it's why I wanted to look at in today's video, just to follow on the back of what I said in the last video I did, where I was anticipating we're overdue for some nice trades, and this is exactly the kind of trades that we're looking for, that's unfolded actually beautifully. If you remember from previous videos, and you've been following my videos for a while, you'll know that this Holy Grail trade setup is one of my favorite MT Predictor trade setups. Not because it has a high percentage of winners, but because when the winners come through, they're large in relation to the initial risk. And as you can see here, a potential 9R profit in relation to the 1R risk is a very, very good trade indeed. Here it would have turned an initial risk of approximately $380 odd, ignoring slippage and commission, into a profit of just over $3,400. So a very, very good trade indeed. And that is a great example of our MT Predictor Holy Grail trade setup, and also a great example of the cyclical nature of trading unfolding over the last few days, where we come out of a period of uncertainty and harder times to then have an absolutely beautiful trade like this, where the result was an absolutely massive 9R profit. So a very good day for MT Predictor users yesterday with this Holy Grail sell that got you short, ready for the sharp decline in the NQ down into there on the close yesterday.